Hey folks, Zach Osterman here, Insider, Indianapolis Star. Shooting this quick video, just talking about Kurtis Rourke, the news that we confirmed. ESPN's Pete Thamel reported first. Rourke is expected to miss the Washington game next Saturday because of the injury suffered against Nebraska. It's still kind of unclear. Is it a hand, thumb? Is it fingernail? I think the one thing that you feel like you can probably say with a certain amount of confidence, because the belief is that Rourke will be able to play this season. They're still trying to figure out a timetable. Is my understanding. It's not necessarily been set yet, but there is a belief that Rourke will be able to play again this season. So maybe the one thing you can say with confidence is, it seems unlikely anything's like broken, because obviously, that's his throwing hand. If there were a serious bone or ligament issue that was not going to allow him to grip the football, then you would imagine that would maybe end his season, because Indiana's only got 6 weeks and 5 games left, at least in the regular season. But the belief is, for now, that Rourke should be able to return this year. They just don't know exactly when. In the meantime, Tayven Jackson steps in for him. Obviously, Kurtis Rourke actually expressed some optimism yesterday. I can find the quote here. He said it he kind of headed the whole thing off at the pass. It was like the third or fourth sentence in his opening statement. He said, "I know people are going to ask me about Kurtis Rourke. Thought he played really well in the first half. He had a thumb on a helmet. Nail kind of came off. So again, Kurtis Rourke is sort of suggesting that it maybe is an issue with the nail. We'll know more tomorrow, but optimistic." I think you could see, Rourke threw, I think, 4 passes after he had that he kind of slapped it on the Nebraska player's helmet. 3 of them, frankly, I did not think he looked particularly comfortable. So, again, it's a question, if you have, it may seem like a small thing, but, even if just it's something like a fingernail, but your thumb's in a lot of pain, the question is, can you grip the football firmly enough to deliver it accurately and on time and with the right kind of power and whatever else? So the point is, Kurtis Rourke expressed some interest, or some optimism. Forgive me. I've only just had my coffee. Slept in a little bit this morning, and then woke up and kind of dove right into this after feeding the kids. He expressed some optimism on Saturday. It does sound like maybe it's a little bit worse than feared on Sunday. Again, there is a belief that Rourke will play again this season. It's just a question of when. Indiana's got 3 more games now before its next bye, between the Michigan visit and the Ohio State trip. On the one hand, there's no getting around it. Like, Rourke had been one of the best quarterbacks in the country, certainly one of the most consistent quarterbacks in the country. The only player in America completing a higher percentage of his passes was Dillon Gabriel. Rourke, I think a stat that I think we talked about maybe on our podcast last week, or that I talked to maybe a Nebraska podcast about, I can't remember which, was that actually if you compared Rourke to a lot of his contemporaries, players like Gabriel or Will Howard or Will Rogers, who Indiana will see next weekend when Washington comes to town, what was impressive about Rourke's numbers is that he was putting them up despite the fact that he wasn't attempting, in a lot of cases, nearly as many passes per game as a lot of these other players that we were comparing him to, or we are comparing him to, which is to say he's getting his yards and his touchdowns a lot more efficiently. I think he was on, before the Nebraska game, something like 26.7 pass attempts per game, which is not a high number when you consider how prolific Indiana has been passing the ball. That is just how, Indiana is first in the Big Ten in plays of 10, 20, and 30 plus yards. And a lot of that is Rourke's ability to push the ball to intermediate and even sometimes, what you call long or deep routes in the pass game. He had been, so in command. He'd only thrown 2 interceptions all year. I know he threw the one on the Hail Mary yesterday. You kind of lopped that one off. That one doesn't really count. That's not a decision by any means. That is just, sort of a prayer, and you understand that there's a decent chance it'll get picked off. He had been having a season as good as any I think Indiana's ever seen from a quarterback, frankly. And, to lose that, it stings. There's no doubt about it. To lose that, especially in a 6-year quarterback, a quarterback who, so clearly had the respect of his teammates and the confidence of his teammates and his coaches. That is a tough loss, and you don't just kind of rebound from that without any kind of recoil, if you understand what I'm saying. Having said that, and this is where I will insert my own personal analysis a little bit here. We haven't talked a lot about it just because Rourke's been healthy and Rourke's been so good. I've been more impressed with Tayven Jackson every time I've seen him. That goes back to the spring game last year, and I know he was throwing against a second-team defense, but, he probably threw the ball better than Rourke did that night. And, it's a limited sample size, but he's 12 of 18 this season for 225 yards and 3 scores. It's worth saying he's also rushed the ball 6 times for 36 yards and a touchdown, and he rushed it twice for 21 yards yesterday. I think he also had another longish run chalked off because of a holding penalty. He's probably a little bit more just sort of like naturally mobile than Rourke, although Rourke I think used to be, and then I think that the ACL tear kind of made him a little bit more stationary. But the point is that you can probably layer a little bit more QB move, if you want to say, into your game plan with Tayven Jackson. Now, how much Indiana wants to do that, when obviously it doesn't want to wind up in a situation where Tayven Jackson gets hurt too, I don't know. But the point is, Jackson, in my opinion, and this again, we've seen him in the limited sample size. We've seen him kind of in some more slightly more controlled settings, like the spring game. But I actually think Jackson's come a pretty long way since last season, and I think it's worth saying again, it's a limited sample size to some extent. But Jackson was 7 of 8 for 91 yards and 2 scores coming into the second half yesterday in relief of Rourke. And while I don't think Tayven Jackson was by any means obviously the reason Indiana shut Nebraska out in the second half, that was obviously down to Indiana's defensive performance. But it is worth saying he's a quarterback in a half where you do outscore what looks like what should be a quality opponent 28-0. He looked poised. He had a couple. He made some simple throws, which are actually sometimes a little bit more important. You don't want to overrate it, but it is important to have a quarterback that can just make the rhythm throws, the timing throws. This offense is quietly based largely around throws that are structured to be more straightforward for a quarterback, and therefore keep everything on time and everything in rhythm. And then that's how you open up the big shots. But he also had that one touchdown pass to Elijah Surratt that just it was a great catch, but it was a great throw too. It was a confident throw. It was the sort of throw that you make if you believe A, in your ability to deliver the ball, in sort of a pinpoint location, and B, your receiver's ability to go win that ball and make that catch. And if seeing that, I think in Tayven Jackson will be really encouraging for Indiana. Kurtis Rourke was kind of asked about Jackson, and I can even read you kind of what he said. His answer was a little bit more layered, but he said somebody asked him just about essentially what he made of kind of what he made of Tayven, of like his assessment of him. He said he's always been the backup quarterback. I thought he played well his first opportunity at home, second opportunity at home, okay. Guy still has to practice better. It's hard to be the second string quarterback because you don't get many reps. We put in a lot of new stuff in the pass game week to week. But I thought he went in there and did a good job. I had confidence. The team had confidence. I was proud of him. And I think what Cignetti was saying there is, a lot of what you'd expect. He's sort of saying he's not as veteran as Rourke. He still needs to be more consistent in some areas. This is Tayven Jackson. But he also acknowledged, especially in the season, your starting quarterback gets the bulk of your reps in practice. And when you start installing stuff into an offense that, is either specific to the game plan of a certain opponent or stuff that you've evolved over the course of the season, it tends to be installed for the starter because it's installed around his strengths and his performances and leaning into what he's doing well and how the offense is kind of coalescing around him. And a backup is going to get some reps. You're going to try and keep him sharp, but you're not going to plan around Rourke or around Jackson the way you're going to plan around Rourke. Now Indiana gets that opportunity, and it gets that opportunity. I think, if nothing else, I think what you can say about Jackson's performance on Saturday is that it will be very helpful, I would assume, for Indiana to be able to go into a full week of prep knowing Tayven Jackson is the starter, and Tayven Jackson carrying into that week the confidence of having played really well against what was supposed to be a good defense in a dominant win. He was a part of that win. He had a couple touchdown passes, including one that was really impressive. And he kind of stepped in. I saw a tweet from somebody, forgive me, I don't remember who, but a tweet that kind of came across my timeline yesterday afternoon after the game where somebody said that they were sitting in the stands and someone near them said, I didn't even realize we made a quarterback change because things had just kind of kept ticking over so smoothly with Jackson behind center. So you're not, it's not ideal to lose your starter, but if you know you're not going to have him, that does mean that you get that full week of prep with Tayven Jackson getting all the first team reps, with Mike Shanahan, Tino Sinceri, Kurt Signetti building everything from, adjustments and game plan around Jackson and giving him, kind of all the tools that they can and all the confidence that they can. And you get Jackson walking into that week with the confidence of having played well and contributed to a Big Ten win, a dominant Big Ten win, one of the probably the best Big Ten wins in program history the weekend before. So, it's Indiana's had the Nick Kidwell injury aside, fairly good luck with player health this year. This is the first really big setback in season. We'll see how long Rourke is out. Again, my understanding is Indiana is still sort of trying to work on a timetable to understand, exactly when he can meet certain benchmarks and when they can sort of plan for or hope to have him back. But in the meantime, Tayven Jackson will step in. And Indiana is home at noon Saturday against Washington, a team that's got kind of beat up by Iowa, but had been pretty good defensively before then. So it's going to be a good test pretty much right away of just how capable Tayven Jackson is of marshaling that offense. I guess we'll leave it there for now, but wanted to pair this video to the written content that we put together today and just kind of analyze a little bit more, how this breaks down, how this shakes out, and where Indiana goes from here. So thank you so much for watching. For the Indianapolis Star, I'm Zach Osterman. We'll talk to you soon.